My name is Mark Asher, and this is CSS Display. I want to take a quick moment to just say that even though I put this presentation together, I am definitely not the author of this presentation. I have borrowed heavily and extensively from about 5 different sites. I will cite them at the end of my presentation. However, all the stuff you see on here, I did not create it. I just pulled it off to give examples to teach. I figure, why recreate the wheel? Someone else did it. I'm just going to be showing it so you guys can hopefully understand it. All right, so let's move on here. Okay, so the display property is one of CSS most important properties for controlling layout. Essentially, every element on a web page is a rectangular box. The display property determines just how that rectangular box will behave. When using the display property, the proper syntax that you see on the screen here is display and then the value. And the value used will affect the box in different ways. Let's look at some commonly used CSS properties. The default value for all elements is inline. Most user age and style sheets, the default styles that the browser applies to all sites, reset many elements to block. Now we're going to go over some of these and then cover some other ones that are lesser known. All right. The inline element is always just called an inline element. This is this default value for elements. Elements like span, M, and the B element can each wrap text in a string of text, and it doesn't break the flow of text, as you see on the page or on the screen here. Take an example here. Span is a standard inline element, and the span fits right into the text. It surrounds it like this. Doesn't take away from, doesn't break the flow of text. It stays right there because it's in line. Let's look at another one here. This is taken off WC3's page about CSS property. This is about the display property. As you can see on the screen, and you'll see a couple screens like this later on, very similar, but the side on the left displays the type of property you're going to be looking at. Right now we're looking at an inline. On the right hand side you can see that the bottom part says the CSS code is the span, hashtag my span, and then the background color is red and display is inline. Well, you see it right there in the result span element, and then another span element. My span is in between that, and it is red. So it goes right inside the text. Does not interrupt any of that. Go on. Okay, so and then here's another perfect example of this. It says the inline, the M element is also inline. Has a border, 1 pix red border all around the inline element part. And if you notice, it sits right in line with the text. Now, an inline element, here's another example of it. An inline element will accept margin and padding, but the element will still sit in line. As you can see, margin and padding will only push elements horizontally away, but not vertically. So if you can see, there is some space on either side, left and right, but it won't go up and down. It still stays right in with the text. So an inline element will not accept height or width. It's just going to ignore that. So an inline block, as you can see right here, this is an example of inline block. The element set to inline block is very similar to inline in that it will set in line with the natural flow of the text on the baseline. So if you can see where like the word block go right along with the baseline of that sentence. The difference is that when you set a width and height, it's going to be accepted. So as you can see, there is a space up and down and side to side. So inline block allows vertical and horizontal space around the words that you are putting that around. All right. A block element is often called a block level element. A number of elements are set to block are by the browser user agent style sheets. They're usually container elements like div, section, and unordered lists. They also text blocks, like paragraphs and headings. Block level elements do not sit in line but break past them. By default, without setting width, they take up as much horizontal space as you can. As you can see on the screen here, the div version of this that I pulled offline, it's trying to take up as much vertical space as in horizontal space as much as it can, taking as much left and right as it can go. This is a div, and it starts on the line, it goes left and right. Some other ones that are like that are the paragraph and form, and then also headers, footers, and sections. They're also block elements that are vertical or rectangle boxes that will try to take up as much space unless you specify. The two elements with the red borders are paragraphs, which are block level elements. The M element, which is in between, doesn't sit in line because the blocks break down below those inline elements. But here's an example of that. Another example I just want to show off that we're looking at block. On the left, it shows that the property is. We're looking at my span. Same thing before. There's the code. There's the display. It's in red. It separates the text. It makes the whole thing off. It takes so much horizontal space as it possibly can and separates the two lines of text above and below it. So that is another perfect example of block. Now we're going to talk about none. Another common display value is none. Some specialized elements such as script use this as their default. It's commonly used in JavaScript to hide and show elements without really deleting or recreating them. This is different from the visibility term. Setting display to none will render the page as though the element doesn't exist. Visibility hidden, however, will hide the element, but the element will still take up the space as if it was fully visible on your screen. So none removes the element from the page. So it's, even though it's in your code, it's removed visually and in any other conceivable way, so you can't tab it, it's ignored by screen readers, it's not there. Here's a perfect example of it. Once again, we're looking at none, span element, no span element, CSS code shows it's supposed to be red. Because the display is none, it's not there. It has been hidden by the screen. So now we're looking at a couple other things here. Let's look at, there's some more display items like as list item and table. On a list item, lets the element behave like a list element. As you can notice, there's a little dot next to my span there. So it's acting like it's a list. So list item makes an element like a list. A table will make an element behave like a table element. Let's talk about that for a second here. So here's some perfect examples of table values. These display values force non-table elements to behave like table elements, unlike if you need that to happen. Sometimes allow you to be more semantic in your code while utilizing the unique positioning powers of tables. As you can notice, there's a whole slew of them there. There's table, table cell, table column, column group, all the way down to caption. So those are things you can use to help create tables. Flexbox is what it looks like. Flexbox, there's some older versions of Flexbox syntax, so you got to consult different places, but this is what it looks like in your CSS. It's going to be a display with flex, and we use it a lot in what we do with our web design. If you want to look at some more examples of Flexbox, you can go to the CSS tricks, and they have an article about it called using Flexbox. It's pretty neat. It shows you a lot about it, but I'm not talking about Flexbox, but that's someplace you can go if you want to look at that. And there's also a complete guide to Flexbox that they have. It's called a guide to Flexbox on the csstricks.com snippets CSS, and so you can find that as well. They have grid layout, also very much like the Flexbox, what it looks like. Display grid. Grid layout will also be initially set up by the display property. So if you need to use that, CSS Tricks also has a complete grid guide you can go to, which also includes a browser support chart. So if you're ever in need of that, you can do that. Here is a whole slew of lists of stuff that you can use. Display properties. You can look at it, you can see over. Display is used in many different ways, many different ones, and I don't understand all of them. But as you notice, there's a few on there that I did mention. There's block. You can see flex. There is inline, and it's interesting that some will display outside and inside values in the same thing. So you can have inline table or a flex run-in. And so if you look at those, and if you go down, they have ones down to the display legacy values. Legacy, I believe, is things that came from previous versions of HTML and CSS that were grandfathered into here, and they're still being used. So there's a legacy. It's something that was originally created with, so they use those in the programming. And so, and then there's something extra you can talk about is every element has a default display type. However, you can always override it. It wouldn't make sense to make an inline div, so you can use this to customize elements that have particular semantics. A common example is an inline list element for horizontal menus. So even though it has a default, you can overcome it with using some CSS display values. Well, we're at the sources, and like I said, I pull everything offline. This all came from CSS Tricks Display, the Learn CSS Layout, the w3schools.com CSS Display Property, and they're also their play key stuff. They also have the MDN Web Technology for Developers CSS Display, and then I pulled some stuff off the CSS Display Module Level 3. And I have all the websites, so if you need those. But so yes, everything I got here came from someone else. That is CSS Display. I hope you've learned a little bit about it. It's important. We'll be using it a lot. And that's all I have to say. Thanks.